You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
And welcome back to the Recovered Life Show, episode 102, Monday, April 25th, 2022. How you doing, Kristina Dennis?
I am doing wonderful, Damon Frank. How are you? How was your weekend?
It was really great. Did a little bit of traveling. Went to the Seattle area, which was a lot of fun. And it's shocking how different it is weather-wise, right? Like
Right.
you leave Southern California and you realize like there's real weather out there. It rains.
Yes. The Northwest. Yes, there's plenty of weather
What
out
is
there.
the water? What is this water coming from the sky? But
Right.
good. It's Monday morning and we're here and I'm so thrilled to connect with you. I hadn't spoken with you in a couple of days. I usually speak with you during the weekend to prep the show. And I was gone and I know you had a good weekend. How was your weekend?
It was beautiful. Very nice. Very nice. Chilling at home. I live where a lot of people vacation to. So, I really enjoyed just our weather. It was really nice down here.
It is great. It is the whole Southern California vibe, and the recovery vibe here is amazing as well. But it was interesting. A lot of people in recovery in Washington State, a lot in Seattle, and it has a really huge community of people there. It was interesting. The hotel that we were staying by, we drove by this place called the Recovery Cafe, and I've got to look into it to see. I think it was a coffee shop for people in recovery. And I thought, that's great. We could, hopefully they're playing the Recovered Life Show podcast there at the Recovery Cafe. So good to see everybody. Good to see everybody today. Episode 102. It's Monday, April 25th, 2022. We've got a really great show for you. Two jam-packed, informative, make you think segments coming up here. One of which was found by Kristina Dennis, and I can't wait to get into it.
Before we do that, though, I want to let everybody know this show's being brought to you by Recovered Life contributors and people like you. Please like, share, follow, and leave us a comment so that we can keep bringing you stories that you're interested in. Also visit info.recoveredlife.us. You can join the network, which is completely free, and leave us a donation that allows us to continue to help others. That's info.recoveredlife.us.
Well, Kristina, thank you so much for mentioning that. You know, one addition that I wanted to make sure at the very start of the show, something very exciting happened last week on the Recovered Life Show, is we added a new element to our podcast, and that's the Recovered Life discussions. And we added the first one from my Unstuck room on Thursday. And it was really great. And people really like it. There were some comments that people really enjoyed being able to listen to these discussions as well as the live show here.
Such good stuff comes up in those discussions, and it really helps us all to connect at a deeper level. I love being part of them, so I'm glad that we're doing it.
It's really, really great, these discussions, and more about those and how you can access them later on in the show. But I'd like to get into it here because we got a really great segment coming up. And it is, I got to give you the title because I love this title. How to Identify an Egomaniac with an Inferior Complex.
So true.
Why are we doing a segment on this?
Well, you've heard it, right? I mean, I think that, I came up with this topic because I was watching the documentary on HBO, and a person in recovery was speaking up. It was in the Atlas of the Heart segment series that she's doing, Brene Brown's doing. And he brought it out. And I really, I'd heard it so many times in the beginning of my recovery in the rooms. And I have to tell you, I didn't always identify with it. And I think that this is going to be a very cool discussion to have with you, because I still believe, and she addressed it, that the egomaniac and the inferiority complex are actually living together, that they're not the spectrum that people think they are. There's not this huge distance between them.
I got to ask you before we go on, Kristina, what is an egomaniac? Because I think I don't really quite totally understand that myself. So what is it? When you say egomaniac, what does that mean?
Okay, according to the article that we have attached to the show, egomaniac is known as someone suffering from an obsessive preoccupation with oneself and applies to someone who follows their own ungoverned impulses and is possessed by delusions of personal greatness and feels a lack of appreciation. That's how they defined it, which I think is I think that was a good definition. Don't you? I mean, that really fit how I felt when I got here.
I do. And this is interesting. I'm going to bring this up on the screen for the people who are watching on YouTube or watching the replay of this. This article is from a recovery center called Palm Partners. And just so everybody can, we're going to put a link in the description box in the podcast and in the actual show for Facebook and wherever you might be listening to it. But what's interesting about this is so many times we hear, Kristina, that alcoholism and drug addiction and any addiction generates from the obsession with self. So
right.
I guess what I was going to, when I read this, I thought, well, is Kristina saying that everybody who comes in to recovery in some level is an egomaniac because you are obsessed with yourself, obviously?
Yes, I am. I think even people with low self-esteem are still obsessed with themselves. I had somebody I really admire in recovery. She used to say, I'm not much, but I'm all I ever think about. And I felt like that really, really shared it. Exactly how I felt when I came into recovery. The part that people don't see who aren't in recovery is the enormous amount of shame and the inferiority complex that actually comes with it as well, which is why I thought this was a great topic for us Monday morning, because a lot of people outside of the recovery world might see this person who's very boisterous and selfish and, the things that we do when we are in active addiction and kind of believe, wow, that person has no shame, they're shameless, which is not true. And so, I'm an egomaniac with the inferiority complex is something that we often hear in the rooms. And the way that the article describes it is, I thought kind of like very, very good as far as definitions, but they broke it down into 6. What do you think about that statement, though? I've got to know before we move forward.
I'm an
egomaniac. Yeah, I'm an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. Did that fit?
No, it's interesting because I think you really tapped into something that's interesting. There are different personality types, and there are people that are more, I would say, type A. They're more boisterous. They're going to connect with people. They're the people who are going to share their first day. They're going to, right. These are the type the personality trait. And then there's people who will kind of sit in the back of the room and not say anything for months, maybe a year, right? Like I've known people like that too. And then there's everybody in the middle. And I think what you tapped on that's interesting is it's not necessarily how they act on the inside or the outside. It's what they're thinking and feeling on the inside. And this obsession with self, we know, look, 12 steps is all about, the whole beginning of the 12 steps is all about powerlessness and the obsession with self. So we know that, I guess what you're saying here is that just the obsession with self makes you an egomaniac to a certain degree.
Exactly. Because I didn't identify with it because I wasn't, I don't know. I had 2 parts of me, right? Which is exactly what this is saying. I had the part of me that needed the alcohol to become the life of the party. But underneath, there was a true scared introvert, that really wanted to, use codependency in order to be liked. And it is the obsession of self that I think needs to be pulled out, because egomaniac might be somebody who thinks that this person is going to be bigger than life, or they don't see it in themselves if they happen to be a little shyer or a little more subdued. Some of the ways that you can figure out if you are an egomaniac or if you are in relationship with an egomaniac is that exaggeration is something that egomaniacs use. And that checks the box, right? We exaggerate. We, look at overemphasizing ourselves in order to promote our worth and our image while secretly fighting the feeling of less than. And that, I believe, is completely true. So, second one is ridicule. If you have somebody and you're in a relationship or you find yourself to be a person who ridicules others, I mean, that is a check in that area, that you are showing such unrealistic standards towards somebody else and expectations. All of us have been around somebody that is like that. I deal with this all the time when we're working within family systems, right? Where it's like they never, ever say a kind word, but we know underneath there that shame is driving that. That as hard as this person is being on you, they are being as hard, and unaccepting of themselves. And so there's some compassion that's needed when we're dealing with people. Fishing for compliments. Did you fish for compliments? I did.
Yes, I did. I definitely did. And I think that the fourth thing, the hypersensitivity, being hypersensitive, that's definitely something. I think really though, when it comes down to it, because look, we have the 12 steps was really genius. Really, when you think about it, and I'm going to really pick out AA in particular here, the study of AA, right?
Okay.
Not necessarily the application of AA, because we have proof of the application of AA, but the study of AA, the text of AA, where it talks about this self-obsession, this obsession of self being the root of this issue, and that being tied into unmanageability and powerlessness. And I'm saying that specifically for people who are new to recovery. They're identifying more with powerlessness and unmanageability and the obsession of self, right?
Yes.
And I think that this huge, thinking back, one of the big obsessive things that I was able to let go of, one of the big first spiritual awakenings, which is what the 12 steps actually is pointing to, right? Like, you're going to have the spiritual awakening, and then this is going to relieve you, right? It's going to give you, it's going to help you, right? But the first thing is, it's not all about you, right? The first big spiritual awakening, I think people learn after the powerlessness and unmanageability thing is, hey, it's not all about me. Right. There's other things going on in other people. So I would say that, baked into alcoholism is this, egomaniac obsession with self. I just think it doesn't come out like people think an egomaniac is.
Right.
I think people think that egomaniacs are running around saying it's all about me all the time and blah, blah. And I think a lot of times this obsession with self comes across as not being able to take care of yourself, lack of self-care, to be honest with you. It's the opposite.
Exactly. And that's what makes it confusing when you go after codependency, because in codependency, part of the treatment or recovery is starting to think of self again, but think of self in an honest way, rather than asking somebody else to take care of you, which is what I did in my alcoholism and my codependency. It actually puts the onus and the responsibility on oneself. And, first we get right-sized, then we figure out how to take care of ourselves right-sized without expecting other people to do it.
Yeah. I think that what this taps on, which is so interesting, is that this where it goes wrong with the obsession of self. And we know, one of the things that we know for sure is that the ability to be able to stop thinking is, we talk about this on Recovered Life discussions all the time about, like, well, how do you get out of this? If you're constantly thinking about yourself all the time, right?
Right.
What I find is, and we talk about this in the Unstuck room constantly, is part of the problem with recovered alcoholics is they can't execute. Yeah. They can't do anything because they're constantly thinking about their role in it, what they're going to do, right? The whole thing, they're obsessed with themselves and thinking about themselves, even though I think people think when you're an egomaniac, it's all positive about yourself. But I find that alcoholism, it's all negative for the most part.
So true. And underneath that is real negativity. And we dress it up with this bolstered, bravado that isn't real. And I think that the outside world that maybe is not in recovery is starting to understand that when they talk about imposter syndrome. I'm starting to see the world kind of catch up to where we have been in recovery, going, wow, this isn't working anymore. I'm expecting way too much out of myself, and the standards are too high. Another one is you hate losing. Well, that one's kind of a gimme, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't look, we were just talking about this before the show. I hate losing. And just
Hmm.
because you hate losing doesn't mean that you're an egomaniac, but it could mean a bunch of different things. But hating to lose is definitely something that, I think this is the main reason that people die of alcoholism is that
Yes.
they believe, look, we see this all the time as a coach, Kristina, is that they come in and they think that they're somehow going to be able to get the upper hand.
Right. Right.
Without they somehow feel that they're going to be able to pull it off, and this is the delusion that we're talking about with being an egomaniac.
So, so true. The last one, which I thought was really interesting, but it makes sense if you're self-centered, is problem with paying attention and how that is within a relationship and how difficult it is. When I was obsessed with self, it was hard for me to even see other people. However, I kind of dressed it up with codependency. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
But the motive in codependency was always that the other person needed to take care of me. And I'm
Yeah.
reminded of the great line that Bette Midler said in Beaches, enough about me, enough about me to her friend, enough about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think about me? And I thought that
Exactly.
was hysterical, but so true.
The thing is about codependency that I think that people don't, and you might not agree with me on this one,
Okay.
but I find that codependency, and having suffered from this too, is, so much about the practical application of being a codependent is
Hmm.
about carrying on this con
Yes.
that and the thing
Manipulation.
and the person who's being conned that you realize is yourself. You're conning
Yes.
yourself that you're actually doing this to help other people, but really at the core, it's really all about you and what you're getting out of it, right?
And
And
control.
control, right? Which is what
Hmm.
you're getting out of it a lot of times, right? This
Right.
control issue. And you talk a lot about this in Recovered Life discussions about how, about letting go of this control, the identification. I think one of the most amazing things have been in recovery is when you realize that you might have codependency traits, and they might be simple and innocent, right? Like they might
Right.
not really affect a lot of people. It just might be a trait. Like you talk about and can't say no about always having to be the person that makes the brownies for the baseball team, or always
Yes.
the person who's over volunteering and stuff. It might be, and there might not be an outwardly aggressive egomaniac thing
Not at
going
all.
on in that
Yeah.
group. It's just you're doing it to yourself. You're the victim, and it's this con that people tell themselves. It's like, no, really, this is all about other people, but really, at the end of the day, it's all about them.
It so is. And, I believe codependency is another word for the fawn trait, which is a trauma response. And it's something that we learn early in. I just think that everybody is much more complicated than they realize, and that shame is underneath all of addiction somewhere. And so regardless of how we present, it's this, to me, it's being backed into a corner, trying to figure out how do I live life right sized, which is another one of my favorite words or phrases from the program, and realize that I'm one of many, that I do not have to be the lead every single day. And there's some real freedom in that surrender.
Yeah, and I think this is the dance, right? When we're talking
Hmm.
about this is the dance with, I think everybody is an egomaniac to a certain degree. Everybody thinks about themselves more than they probably should, right? Like, so
Right.
I don't think that this is exclusive to recovery, people in
Not at all.
recovery. But I think to identify this, what you really tapped on here, I think the power of this is to identify where in your life that you might be an egomaniac when it comes to obsessive thought, because I
Yes.
think it's harder. Like, look, the reality is that when people come into recovery, they do have a lot of needs. And in a
Yes.
way, they need to make it all about them. And sometimes the family members need to make it all about them and their
Right.
recovery, right? Like what does this person need in which to stay sober? Because if you, like we always say, Kristina, if you can't stay sober, none of this stuff really matters. Like
Right.
you're not going to be able to work on your true self if you can't stay sober. You're not going to be able to work on your spiritual connection or
So
your
true.
life skills if you can't stay sober.
It's kind of one of those contradictories in 12-step, which is it's a selfish program, but yet our 12-step is about being of service to others. And so I always love the complexity of these concepts. And as having lived experience, I can tell you that when I can walk into a place or be part of a community and be one of many, not overstate my qualifications, not understate them either. If I can keep in mind that I want to remain useful, then I'm in a much better place mentally.
Well, I had to absolutely, and I had to mention this too, because one of the things that was in here was this whole thing about fishing for compliments.
I love
which
it.
is interesting. And I'll admit that I will do that sometimes as well, because sometimes, if you're a doer, sometimes it's you realize that you got into things that maybe you shouldn't have done, or you did service things that you shouldn't have done. And then you're like, well, no one's noticing me doing it. Right. Like, and I don't have those thoughts a lot. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't, but it's human to have those thoughts. Like, this is not exclusive to people that are in recovery, right? Like, that's why they have award shows, right?
Yes.
To acknowledge, right? Like, that's why they have people get awards for things.
One of the disciplines in ACOA, you'll love this, is that you will do something nice for somebody else without being found out. And that really tells you how much you want to do it, right? If you do something nice without telling the person, then you're really getting into that place of service.
That's so funny, because I was going to mention that too. I will tell you, one of the biggest breakthroughs that I've had with people in working with people is this application of, what I want you to do is I want you to go out and do 5 great things this week that you're going to be of service for people, but you're not going to tell anybody but me.
Right.
Right. And, sometimes you see people will say, you know what, I'm really upset about this. And what it comes out is this identification of being an egomaniac and a lot of people, I've had a lot of people that have breakthroughs with that, is to say, like, you know what, why am I so upset that I can't tell other people about this whole thing about fishing for compliments? And it's like, but out of that, it's really weird. You start to see a breakthrough of, hey, you know what? What's this about? Why do I have to always feel like I have to tell people the good things that I did? Isn't just the good things enough? Right.
Yes.
And I've seen a lot of breakthroughs in that area, and I've had breakthroughs in that area.
Me too.
Right. I mean, doesn't everybody, Kristina, to a certain degree, have something in their life where they feel that they want to have some sort of compliment about?
Absolutely. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But when you live for it, when you twist yourself into a pretzel to get the praise, you're still at the mercy of others. And what we learn in recovery by doing this work is that the self-love that we start learning how to have, how to focus on, a real self-love means that we already feel good about ourselves, and anything anybody else piles on is extra.
Absolutely. And I think this is and thank you so much for bringing this to my attention, this article. And I hope that this helps people listening to this, because I think at first glance, everybody says, oh, I have no ego tendencies. I am devoid of ego, right? Like, I've heard that.
I've nothing.
I've worked on this so much. I have nothing. Yeah. But I think everybody has something. And I think that this is at the very, very, very end, right, of the day. I think that the big lesson for people in recovery is to really ask this question. It's like, I say this question a lot of times when I start feeling frustrated that other people aren't getting it. Right. That's a sign that it's like, well, no, I want it to go my way.
Yes.
And I'm now choking out any opportunity, right? We talk about this.
Totally.
Choking out any opportunity for God, the universe, life to bring me something better than what I have, or more appropriate than what I have. And this question to ask yourself constantly is, it's not all, or the statement I would say, it's not all about me.
Right.
I think when I have those thoughts, I say that statement, it's not all about me. There's other people in the world, right, that need to get what they need to get. And there's other people that are in my sphere, whether that's the family, coworkers, or whatever. They also have needs, and they need to get those met as well.
So true. So true. Don't block your miracles.
Don't block your miracles. Great words of advice, Kristina Dennis. Thank you so much for bringing this article to our attention, and really a great discussion. We want to hear what you have to say. So definitely put your comments in the threads, like, share, follow. I have to say, Kristina, before we go into the next segment, which I think everybody is really going to enjoy as well, is I need to mention the Recovered Life community and how you can help out the Recovered Life community. If you always listen to the podcast, if this is your go-to recovery check-in, we so appreciate you. A really simple way to do it is to like, share, and follow. But if you want to take your support to the next level and make a small donation, you can do that at info.recoveredlife.us. And what that does is it helps us help others, right? And
Yes.
that's the best thing about recovery is that when you get to a place where you can help other people. So this is definitely a way to do that. And you can access everything there and make that donation. Also join the Recovered Life community just by going to info.recoveredlife.us. That's info.recoveredlife.us. Kristina
Awesome.
Dennis, you excited about the next segment we got coming up?
I am. It's going to be beautiful.
It's going to be good, guys. Hold tight. We've got a little 10-second break, and we're going to be back with segment number 2.
You're listening to the Recovered Life Show.
Welcome back. Are you excited about this next episode? I know you are, Damon. This hits home.
Yes. This is going to be a good one. I definitely relate to this. And I'm really looking to jumping into this topic.
Before we do, though,
topic of college drinking.
Yes. Before we do, though, I want to remind everybody this show is being brought to you by Recovered Life contributors and people like you. Please like, share, comment. Tell us if you relate to egomaniac with inferiority complex. Leave us a comment. And also visit info.recoveredlife.us where you can make those donations that Damon was just speaking of and join the network, info.recoveredlife.us.
You know, Kristina, one of the things I want to mention before we go on here in the next segment is that I love what you said. If you relate as an egomaniac, right? We were talking about that last segment. One of the things that I think is interesting about the show that's been the experience, my experience with recovery and also doing this show, because look, we're well past 100 episodes now. Got a ton of content. Yay. It was just really great, and it was interesting. We mentioned on Recovered Life in the community, we told people that we had, that we had reached that 100 episode mark. And there were a lot of comments from people that I hadn't talked to for a while.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's interesting because I found the show in my own recovery, picking topics that kind of scared me a little bit.
Good. Yes.
Who wants to talk about, I know, Kristina, the last thing that you really want to do is talk about at, decades of recovery that you have is maybe I have some egomaniac tendencies. Who really wants to do that, right?
No one. I tell my clients that all the time, and they're like, but I don't want to, go through that painful past. I said, that makes you sane. Nobody does. We're all human.
Nobody does. Exactly. And you know what? But what I was going to say about this is, and this leads into the next segment that we have here, is that a lot of the times I think by identifying, I've been able to identify the feeling of an uncomfortable conversation. This topic is uncomfortable about it. And through my recovery, I've taken those and maybe written those down on a 3x5 card, Kristina, and said, and maybe it's too even painful to look at, but then to say, it's hey, why do I feel uncomfortable here about this topic? To start to kind of unpack that a little bit, right? And to start having conversations with other people about it.
Yes.
And it's been interesting, this process, because I don't think everybody walks into recovery saying, hey, you know what? I'm cool with every topic and I'm going to be open and honest about every topic. I find that doesn't exist.
Oh, when we just went through the last topic, the first thing that I thought when I saw it was, I'm so sick of this. I hate this statement. I hate it. But as we go through and go a little deeper, it really brings me back online and allows me to connect. And connection is something that alcoholism ripped away from me. It did. It stole my connection.
Absolutely.
So it's worth
Well,
it.
you know, guys, if you're listening to this segment or other segments and you feel a little bit triggered there, I say write that down and dive into it. And that's what the show is really all about, is to explore these topics in a little bit more in depth than maybe you could do at a local 12-step group or with your
Right.
therapist. It's just to have these conversations with people that are in recovery so you can live your best recovered life. Kristina, I'm going to announce this little
Yes.
next segment here because I found this and I really related to this here. So let me put this up on the screen. I found this article from CBC. It's a Canadian broadcaster. And the title of this was "She Quit University Due to an Alcohol Problem. Now sober, she landed a $35,000 scholarship."
So good.
And it was so good. And I'm going to tell you guys, I want to dive in a little bit about my experience with drinking in college, because that is when things really spun out of control for me, right?
Yes.
Like, is because I didn't have, Kristina, I didn't really have I didn't have a control system there, right? There
Right.
weren't enough eyes on me, to be quite
Yes.
honest with you, in my college experience. And a lot of it was just the time and the
Yes.
age, right?
Yes.
But so many kids, and this article that I want to bring up, what I found interesting about this is about second chances, right?
Yes.
And I'm going to bring this up on screen here because I think this is so good. This article dives into this woman's alcohol issue and about how she slowly started to drift away from college because, and you know what, because she was drinking like, she was drinking not like other people. And I've got it up here on up on the screen. I think you can see it, but
Yes.
it's about how alcohol took over her life.
Right.
And I think it's so interesting. And that's what happened to me. That is what
Really?
happened to me, honestly. Yeah. Now I was able to get through it, right? And then go on and then got sober in grad school. But it slowly, it got to a point where it took over my life. And I think so many people, so many kids bounce out of college
Right.
because of alcoholism.
Yes.
Right. They really do. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I know that wasn't necessarily your path necessarily, but it's like, I so related to this. I so related to this.
It's important as an interventionist. A lot of times, a lot of the people that need that intervention are of this age, interestingly enough. And so as a parent of a 17-year-old, and my friends have children about the same age, a lot of times we can miss it or think that it's just party lifestyle and they couldn't handle the responsibility. And so I love that you're bringing up that age in particular, specifically, because, we talked about it last week in the show. People don't grow out of alcoholism. They don't. Of course, there are certain people that the boundaries are off, the governor is off, and they go wild. But what she talks about is the alcoholism that I'm familiar with, which is it takes literally it took over my entire life. And my governor was that I had to support myself, and there wasn't the freedom, which I'm grateful for because it allowed me to get sober. But it's such a precarious age. Your brain isn't fully formed, and you add alcohol on top. And, we still haven't determined exactly why 1/3 of us ends up having an addiction. But it's something that we should talk about, and about, not only alcohol poisoning, which is, I do think, discussed, but actually what long-lasting addiction can look like.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that I related so much, and we've got this up on screen here, is she talks about her friend that she traveled to school with and about how they were roommates, and that within that year, her roommate packed up all her stuff and left and said, "I can't handle this anymore.
So
This
true.
is beyond," right? And it was so funny when I read this. I'm going to be honest, Christina, I had a little flashback
Did
of
you?
a friend that I had not seen, that I had really not thought about in years. And we had actually all traveled as a group to go to college together, right? And we were all transferring into this college together. And when we had gone over to do this, right? I remember within about 6 months, of this guy basically telling me, it's like, I can't hang around you anymore. Like, I have to study, I have to do right. And I remember thinking like, dude, like, what's with you? Like, why are you so uptight? Right.
Right.
And when I read this, it was so interesting because I literally had a flashback and I was like going, oh my God, this was my experience. People slowly started to peel away from me because I
Yes.
was out drinking them. Right.
Yes. Yes.
I was out drinking
Absolutely.
them. And
And
unfortunately for me, just to put that,
yeah,
I
tell
went
me.
to school. I went to school in a city. So what happened was I had access to off campus. So by the time I was done, right? By the time I was done with those people at school, but I wasn't done with school, I
Yes.
had gone on to find other alcoholics in
Yes.
the bar scene in the city that were older than me that could keep up.
Absolutely. Like, I remember very clearly in my drinking, and I didn't start drinking till I was 21. So I think, if I had started earlier, I would have had a similar experience. But by the time I was 21, I remember people, everyone around me drank like I did. And I remember one boyfriend in particular who just couldn't handle it and was like, yeah, I can't go out with you anymore because this is just too much. But what I did was easily, like, we talk about burning the village down, in 12 steps, we burn it down. It was very easy for me at that time just to let people go away, just to figure out, they're too uptight and make it about them. I could not see, for my own sake, what I was doing to myself.
Well, it's so interesting now looking back at 50 something plus of age
Is that
and
hard to
having
say?
almost, well, yeah, having almost like several, having, almost 3 decades of recovery looking back on this. And having, we both have kids
Mhm.
and starting to look at these colleges and stuff and
Yes.
you realize, like, I looked around the other weekend when I was, in this college town and you could see them literally, right? Like, you would
Really.
go through fraternity row or sorority row, or you would go through where the local bars were at the stuff and you could see it. And I think back and I say, man, I wish somebody would have, like, I wish I would have known about recovery right then.
Right.
Now,
Right.
it's interesting looking back on it. There were signs, there were professors,
Mhm.
there was medical people who told
Mhm.
me, it's like, hey man, like, something's not right with you, but no one
Yes.
really caught it and intervened. Now I think that there's more education about it. Like, when I
Yes.
listen to kids talk about it now, I think the drugs are harder. Like,
Mhm.
we've talked about kids taking ketamine on college
Yes.
cat. Like, my God, like, that's like, horrible. But then, but I also think on the top of that, there's designer drugs, there's all this other stuff. But then on top, there's also this awareness that, hey, 1/3 of us might become addicted to this. And we've got to
Yes.
look out for those people. I do believe that that's out there a lot more.
It is. It really is. I mean, I had I was very sickly, shocker, right? Because I was drinking 10 to 25 cocktails a night. I don't know how I kept a job. And I remember one doctor saying, yeah, this liver function, that's interesting because that usually only shows up when somebody's drinking alcoholically. And that was the only time anything was said to me. And here I was going to doctor after doctor. Now, very clearly, if you tell somebody, it's on the actual intake sheet. How many drinks do you drink a week? Have you had a past? And I think that as we continue to take the moral issue out of addiction, the more that people will recognize and say, yeah, this is not okay, and we need to watch you more carefully. I really can't believe, to the binge drinking that I did, that I'm still on this planet sometimes when I now
Yeah.
know the danger of alcohol.
Oh, I look back and I was like, it is a total miracle, right? It's a total
Mhm.
miracle. But, one of the things I want to make sure, because really the point of this article was really about second chances and about
Yes.
how the schools and I would also say the community think
Mhm.
about alcoholism and about, if you guys, I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes because it's such a great article. And she talks about needing a Hail Mary after she'd failed out and all this other stuff, and about how they have built this at the St. Mary's University Environmental Society, that they had built this scholarship for people who were now sober that wanted to go back to school. Yeah, she's a couple years older, but she's just like, look, I need a Hail Mary. And the reason she needs a Hail Mary is because, look, let's be honest. If you were in your early 20s and had bipolar disorder and then had to leave school, the school would be much more receptive of you coming back if you got treatment and you identified that. Not so much with alcoholism. They look at it as a moral issue still.
A failing,
right?
A failing,
right? And I love this because I think this is a clear sign. It's like, and I think having people that have recovered from alcoholism in the college campus situation, I think is so good, because we always talk about peer support.
Yes.
But look, when you're 18, 19 years old, you're not going to relate to a 54-year-old man.
No.
You're not. I didn't. You know what? Like when I was in my 20s, I was like, what are you talking about?
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes. Me too. I like, Gabby is such a beacon of light because she is a Gen Zer and she speaks so openly about recovery. She's on the show a lot. And I think that people are starting to have role models that talk about their sobriety out and out. We do deserve second chances. Right? If you have somebody in your family that is suffering from alcoholism, remember that it's not a moral issue and they deserve a second chance. Once we get the booze out of us, once we can move through that, we can then show up and be amazing citizens, often more productive than maybe somebody who isn't in recovery, because somebody gave us a second chance.
Yeah. And I think that that's the whole thing. I know a lot of people that are in the legal profession, and for years they were not able to say that they were sober because they didn't want it to be used against them.
Totally
right.
True.
And it's just, it's so ridiculous at this point when I look at this. But this honestly, when I stumbled on this article, Kristina, it made me feel good. It made me feel good. It's like, you know what? Wow. This is needed. Right.
Yes.
This is needed. And this isn't for everyone. Right. And I think there's two sides of this coin. It's like, yes, are people that, like, if you failed out of school or you did something in your job, right, when you didn't show up or you didn't perform and do what you're supposed to do because you were suffering from alcoholism, you're still responsible for for what you did. I'm not saying that, right? I think taking responsibility for the actions that you do is super, super important. But I think that the community, though, has to be open, especially with young people, especially like if you're in your 20s, I would say in teens, and you've identified that alcoholism or drug addiction or something is going on with you. It even could be eating, sex, any of these addictions. And you've identified that, you know what, I'm suffering from this and I want to recover and I don't want to live this way. I think that should be rewarded in life.
It absolutely should. It really, really should. And I think the more that we do look at it as a country and as a world, the more we're going to get some of these things, these things that we want as far as incarceration, poverty, all of that. So I'm really glad that, addiction is becoming more commonplace.
Well, I am too. And thank you so much for talking with me about this segment. Really great show today, Kristina. Good Monday show. A lot of information. I got to plug real quick, Recovered Life Discussions, which we're going to be playing another one on the podcast. So if you're listening on the podcast, you will be hearing more Recovered Life Discussions. And a lot of people want to know, how do you connect with Kristina Dennis? How do you connect with Damon Frank? Well, how you connect with us is on Recovered Life. And you can join for free by going to recoveredlife.us. That's recoveredlife.us. You're going to find out all about the Recovered Life Discussions. And we've got one coming up here at 9 a.m. Pacific, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 9 a.m. We always have Recovered Life Discussions on Clubhouse. You can find all about it at recoveredlife.us. That's recoveredlife.us. Become a member totally for free. Takes less than a minute. It's going to plug you into all kinds of exclusive content.
So good. And when you join it, make sure to follow me and say hello. Say hi to us.
Absolutely.
We want to connect with people.
Connect with Kristina, Dennis, and myself on Recovered Life. Kristina, episode 102, Monday, April 25th, 2022, in the can.
Yep.
We'll see you guys this week.
Have a beautiful Monday, everybody.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life, a community of like-minded people who are looking to live their best recovered lives. Membership is free, and you can apply at recoveredlife.us.